my God, Mika, you stink today. Explain yourself.
That's my lunch.
Your lunch.
Yeah, so I saved up and I bought some fancy cheese. It's a Limburger. It's got these subtle citrus tones and this umami that I can't quite put my finger on.
Feet?
Oh, yeah.
Ugh.
You're right. Ugh.
Yeah. No, I think you need to get rid of it, man.
I think I need some fresh cheese.
Yeah.
I need something a bit less ripe.
Yeah, you go get rid of that old cheese, go take a shower, and then we'll come back and talk about the book, okay?
Yeah. All right, you're right.
All right, awesome. Welcome to Thriving Between the Lines, the podcast that examines personal development books through the lens of intersectionality, making self-help content more accessible and relatable. I'm life coach and hangry black woman, Leslie Crudup Garcia.
And I'm Mika, a lactose intolerant guy lost in a maze.
And together, we're not just reading between the lines, we're thriving between the lines. And we're coming to you today from Meanjin, or Brisbane, in Australia, land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, where sovereignty has never been ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Okay, so let's get started.
It's not your usual podcast episode. It's a bit cheesy.
Yeah, I camembert it. Are we already deep into the cheese puns?
We should brief.
Oh, you're lucky you're cute, Mika.
Yeah, I'm a bit
right.
slow. I'm cute, but I'm slow.
Unlike the mice in this book. But anyway, yeah. Before we get into the content of it, I just want to issue a little apology to our vegan and other lactose intolerant listeners, because I understand that mentions of cheese can be quite triggering. So maybe for now we can pretend this is cheese with a Z.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You can have all sorts of non-dairy cheeses.
Yeah. Do you like non-dairy cheeses, Mika?
They're right. It depends on which one.
Yeah. I've gone through periods of fully plant-based eating in my life, even though I'm not vegan myself. I'd like to be, but that's a whole other discussion. I've had some really nice vegan cheeses. I've made cashew cheese a bunch of times, which is really nice. But I think if I do go fully plant-based again, I need to go back to my nutritionist and do it right so I don't end up in the hospital again.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, but let's talk about the book. What is our book for today, Mika?
Who Moved My Cheese? An Amazing Way to Deal with Change in Your Work and in Your Life by Dr. Spencer Johnson.
Hey, thank you. But this book isn't literally about cheese, is it?
No, it's a metaphor.
A metaphor, okay. So what does the cheese actually represent?
Goals?
Okay.
Things you want.
Okay.
Wants and needs.
All right.
I think it was multiple things.
Yeah, the cheese is different things for different people.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor for what you want out of life.
Yeah, could be money. It could be family or relationships or stuff and riches.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for each person, you have to decide what your cheese is while you're reading.
Yeah, for some people, the cheese is something quite lofty. And for some people, it's something very, very basic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was your overall opinion of the book?
Not bad advice.
Okay.
You do have to move with the times and pivot, I guess. It's change where you're heading. Look to try and predict things that might require change and try and be flexible. Good advice. Maybe presented in a bit of an odd way and doesn't cover a lot of the complicated reasons why change is hard for people.
Yeah.
It just kind of is like, do it. Do it. It's like, cool, thanks.
Okay.
I hadn't realized that I should do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have.
Yeah. So as you touched on, the book, even according to the title, is about dealing with change. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of things to like about this book, but there are some things that get overlooked naturally also because this is a really short book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Barely a book.
Yeah. The copy I'm holding has holes punched through it. Like someone stuck it in a 2-hole puncher.
Yeah.
And it could easily fit in a binder. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like getting to the point quickly.
Mm. And because we always look for something we like about the books that we discuss, I didn't find it very difficult to do that with this book.
No. I like the general premise. It's just a little too brief, a little too basic. The story's right, the message, good. Just stops a bit too soon, I guess.
Yeah, so what do you remember about the actual story that's told in this book?
Okay, so there's 2 mice and 2 miniature people in a mouse maze. Mm. And
they are referred to as little people in this book,
yeah,
which wouldn't really fly today. But yeah.
I'm going to call them miniature people because they're like the size of mice.
Yeah.
So you got 2 mice and 2 miniature people in a maze, and it seems to be a lab because there's these stations that cheese appear in, and they just go there every day and get their cheese, and they're happy.
Yeah.
One of them, they just want a house and family of the miniature people. The other one wants to be rich and famous, something.
Okay.
Big lofty goals. And the mice just seem to want cheese. And I'm kind of a bit confused about the difference between, like, why the mice here and the people represent, like, it was a bit confusing.
Okay.
And then the cheese stopped appearing at one station, and then what are they going to do? Like, there's different ways to approach this. Do we just, like, hope that the cheese is going to drop in this spot again? Do we go looking for another place, like, search the maze, maybe get lost, dig through walls?
Yes. Yeah, and that's kind of where the core of the story begins. Mm-hmm. We've got these 4 characters. So those 2 tiny little people that you mentioned, hem and haw, and the 2 mice, sniff and scurry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when they are in cheese station C, they're eating cheese, they're happy, they're chilling, they're like, yay, cheese, blah, blah, blah.
The land of plenty.
The land of plenty. One day, when they are going from their home base to cheese station C, the cheese is just not there anymore. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
And so what do Sniff and Scurry do?
Sniff around and scurry after the scent of cheese, I guess.
Yeah. They right away go and look for more cheese in some other part of the maze. They don't stop and think. They don't hem and haw. Whereas hem and haw, the people, what do? They
overthink it. Like, wait around, like, oh, but pattern recognition, there was cheese here before. Let's just keep waiting for cheese in this spot.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yes. So hem and haw, they get angry. They get upset. They start complaining about the injustice of it all.
How dare they take away my cheese?
Yeah. And they don't just rush off to look for more cheese.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So, if we start there from the story, right away this is illustrating something that is often used against people. Mm-hmm. Right? So what do you think that is illustrating, Mika?
Staying in a job that you don't like or that isn't treating you good, staying in bad relationships, not adjusting to changes in your life. All sorts of different things that can happen where you're kind of like staying in your comfort zone even though the comfort zone is not serving you.
Yes. Yes. So that general message of like, don't sit around and just complain. Go out and find more cheese. Don't sit there wondering who moved your cheese. It's like, I get that. That said, one of the common critiques of the book, it seems like most people who I've run into opinions of on the internet love the book.
Yep.
But there are some critics of the book who saw things in it that I also see as narratives that have been used against people who can't just adapt to change and just pivot and just do something different.
Yep.
But they're still being told, like, no, the problem is your inability to adapt. Yeah.
Don't try and right the wrongs or one, like, the cheese will keep getting moved from others more than some. And just don't worry about it and just keep adapting, changing.
So what we're really going to dive into is the message around adapting to change and the way people are being discouraged from actually addressing what caused the change.
Yes.
All right. So are you ready to dive into that, Mika?
Let's go.
All right. Let's do it. All right. Let's start by looking at these 4 characters in a bit more detail. All right. And then I'm going to ask you a question about this. All right. So again, these are 4 characters in a maze, just doing their thing, finding cheese. This is a description of their style of cheese hunting. There we go. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, used the simple trial and error method of finding cheese. They ran down one corridor, and if it proved empty, they turned and ran down another. They remembered the corridors that held no cheese and quickly went into new areas. Sniff would smell out the general direction of the cheese using his great nose, and Scurry would race ahead. They got lost, as you might expect, went off in the wrong direction, and often bumped into walls. Sounds like a lot of people I know. But after a while, they found their way. Like the mice, the 2 little people, Hem and Haw, also used their ability to think and learn from their past experiences. However, they relied on their complex brains to develop more sophisticated methods of finding cheese. Sometimes they did well, but at other times, their powerful human beliefs and emotions took over and clouded the way they looked at things. It made life in the maze more complicated and challenging. What do you think about that, Mika?
Well, I guess they're kind of saying that animal instincts just tell you to keep on going to survive. Pretty sure they're saying that the mice are not people. At first I was kind of like, oh, are they talking about, like, simple people or something? With the mice? Like, are they meant to be other people? No, thankfully not, I don't think. Kind of putting it down to humans overthinking stuff sometimes. Like, it's great sometimes. We can really, like, learn and make things more efficient. We don't get lost and bump into the walls.
Yep.
But it can become an overthinking thing as well.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting way to lay out this part of the story.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like Sniff and Scurry use their simple animal brains. If one thing didn't work, they would go and do the other thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it caused problems, but they just pivoted and did something else.
Yeah.
Which is a strange way to set them up as the heroes of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know if they're meant to be the heroes. They're almost like an oppositional idea. Like, no one is the perfect person in this story.
Yeah, you could argue that the hero of the story is the actions that one of the... I feel weird saying little people.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
Like, what should we say instead?
Miniature people.
One of the miniature
Mini
people.
people.
One of the mini people. There we go.
Mini.
The mini people. And like the real hero of the story may be one of the mini people.
Yeah.
Right? And it does recognize that human beliefs and emotions can make things like complicated and challenging and stuff. But in a way, it's saying like, it's your fault.
Yeah.
It's your fault that things are complicated and challenging because you're thinking too much. I don't like books that use that kind of messaging. You know, it's like, you think too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of also implies that everything within the world outside of your little domain is out of your control, so don't try and do anything about it.
Yeah. So, okay, that sets us up to understand more about Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw, and their journey to find Cheese Station C. Okay, all right. So these four little fellas are running around. They find Cheese Station C. It's piled high with as much cheese as you could ever want, right? But then their behaviors at Cheese Station C are really where the metaphor truly begins.
Yes.
Because the change starts happening and they respond very differently to it. So then, day after day, their routines look a little bit different. Sniff and Scurry, they wake up early every morning, they race through the maze, they always go the same way to Cheese Station C.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they get there, they hang out. They take their shoes off, but they kind of sling them around their necks so that they're there and ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? In case they need to. And Hem and Haw, on the other hand, they get to Cheese Station C every morning, and they're a bit more chill when they get there.
Yep.
And gradually, they become complacent.
Yes.
They start waking up a little later, they get dressed more slowly, and they walk to Cheese Station C. It's a reliable source of cheese, and they don't know where it came from, but they rely on the fact that the cheese will always be there.
Very intellectual approach.
Yeah. And so when they get there, they hang up their jogging suits, they put away their running shoes, they put on their slippers. I like that they actually got naked. It's like, hang on a minute. They hung up their jogging suits. So I too advocate for getting naked and eating found cheese.
Yes.
So this is something I can appreciate at this
yeah.
point in the
In fact, I think my birthday party has been organized.
It's like, bring your jogging suit, but don't get too comfortable. Wink, wink.
Naked cheese fondue party.
Oh,
You're welcome.
I love it. So they're loving the cheese life.
Yep.
Okay. And this is them living their best cheese life. They feel very happy and they feel successful. Sounds like a nice beginning to that part of the story, right? Mm-hmm. What does it tell you, Mika?
I'm being told to constantly live in fight or flight mode, and that having your sympathetic nerves, like having your shoes around your neck all the time, you have to be ready to run. Like, who knows when things are going to be taken away from you? Never get comfortable.
That is something that I find quite bothersome.
Yeah.
About even this point in the story.
Yeah, and it is a lot about animalistic nature. Animals do live in constant fight or flight mode. They don't relax, really.
Yeah.
And that's part of my illness problems, is I am just constantly on alert. Like, oh, there's danger around the corner. Yeah. Like, even in regards to things like that, something could be taken away. So, like, you know, I've got money, spend it all, because if you don't spend it, someone will take it from you.
Yeah.
Or, like, belongings and possessions, all that sort of stuff. Just, it all feels insecure. And I don't think that's actually something you want to encourage.
Yeah.
It will make you sick if you actually want to live a long life.
Yes. So spoiler alert, this is all setting us up for the fact that the problem with the humans in this story is that they get too comfortable. Mm-hmm. Comfort is bad.
Yes.
Comfort is wrong.
Yeah.
You should always be thinking about your next move. You should always be sniffing around for when the cheese starts to get old so that you can suddenly scurry away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a midpoint between those two extremes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so the cheese that I chase.
Yeah.
Comfort.
Okay.
Like, there's definitely some comfort. Like, I want to feel secure and that I don't have to be worried about my future location, like physical future. But then intellectually and emotionally, like, I want to go places. I want to learn things.
Yeah.
I want to have a career that adds to, like, lives up to my values.
Mm-hmm.
So those are more kind of lofty cheeses that are long distance.
Okay.
Long distance cheeses.
Long distance cheeses.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not at Station C.
I'll tell you a little bit about my cheese.
No. Well.
So my cheese is security for my family.
Oh, yeah.
You know, for my nesting partner and for our daughter.
Yes.
And anyone else who might enter my, my polycule at any given point in my life, should it become a serious relationship, as it were.
Yep.
I want to have some sort of a base from which I can continue to support my community, my activist community, and the causes that I believe in. And of course, to be able to do that in a secure fashion requires financial stability.
It does.
Yeah. As hard as it is living in a capitalist society and trading your time for your basic human needs, that's kind of the world that we're living in right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I guess I also want to add, with the activism as well, it's really hard for me to do that while I don't have a safe base.
Yes.
Like, I need to feel safe and secure.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm constantly in fight mode all the time, and it just becomes overwhelming, and I melt down.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, for me, the majority of my discomfort comes from financial instability. Like, I just want enough
Yeah.
to not worry. I don't want to worry that my car's not going to start or going to break down on the way there. I want to have my own space and,
Well, Mika, if you just tie some shoes around your neck,
yeah,
then you'll be ready for anything.
yeah, I can
Yeah.
just run towards those things and they will be given to me.
Yes. Run out into the void.
Yeah.
You might bump into some walls every now and then, but you'll bounce back.
Yeah, I never broke my neck running into any of those walls.
Yeah.
And I'm now, like, dragging myself along by my fingertips.
Yeah. By your fingertips. Gosh, that's such a visual.
Like a horror movie.
Yeah. And this is one of the issues that is it's not even addressed in this book. The book never answers the question, who moved the cheese?
And that's the name of the book.
Yeah. And I get that this question is supposed to be the thing that's irrelevant, right? It's like, it doesn't matter who moved your cheese. You just have to move to where the new cheese is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Seems kind of like giving the systems a pass
Exactly.
and putting it all on personal responsibility.
Yes. And this is one reason that the majority of criticism against this book that I found in my, my research
Yeah.
was in the way that this book is applied in a management setting.
Yeah.
Yes. When it's applied using a top-down approach, where it's we are the leaders of this company. You're going to read who moved my cheese.
Oh, yeah. I would be incredibly offended if it was the people who can make change say, well, no, but you're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you can't adapt to the changes that we're issuing, the problem is you.
Yeah.
It's not us.
When someone who has power over you
Yeah.
has the ability to change something, and you just kind of ask for that change, and they say, no, all on you. You have to do all the changing. I get to do whatever I want.
Because you just have to adapt. You just have to be resilient.
Which has happened to me recently in regards to like a healthcare practice that I asked. There's this policy that's really like doesn't hold up to research and like evidence base and this sort of thing. And they were just kind of like, no, not going to change it. And also, how dare you question us? You're not welcome here anymore.
Oh.
And lots of places.
That is not cool.
No, lots of businesses could do that. And I'd be like, oh, don't have my money then.
Yeah.
But it's different in a place where they have power over you in a way that like you're vulnerable and open up, and it's not the same thing. And that gets really frustrating where it's all just you adapt to change even if it's incredibly burdensome on you, and it would be not a burden on me to not move your cheese all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the mice and when the mini people return to Cheese Station C one day and find that there's no cheese there, they have very different responses to it.
Yes.
Yep. So the mice did what mice do. They said, no cheese. Let's go find some more cheese. So they hurried off out into the maze. Okay? But people be peoplein'.
Yep.
They got to Cheese Station C. No cheese there. And I'll read a little part of the story explaining what their reaction was. Yeah. Okay? All right. Later that same day, Hem and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C. They had not been paying attention to the small changes that had been taking place each day, so they took it for granted their cheese would be there. They were unprepared for what they found. What? No cheese? Hem yelled. He continued yelling, no cheese? No cheese? I've had moments like that, I tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Especially late at night, coming back from the toilet, wanting to just like bite into a piece of cheese on my way to bed. I'm just like, who took the damn cheese? All right. No cheese? As though if he shouted loud enough, someone would put it back. Who moved my cheese? Titular line. He hollered. Finally, he put his hands on his hips. His face turned red, and he screamed at the top of his voice. It's not fair! All right, I'm going to skip the next page and jump to this little paragraph here, okay? While Sniff and Scurry had quickly moved on, Hem and Haw continued to hem and haw. They ranted and raved at the injustice of it all. Haw started to get depressed. What would happen if the cheese wasn't there tomorrow? He had made future plans based on this cheese. Now, okay, reading that part, I kept thinking, like, if this book had been named something like Who Moved My Insulin? Who Moved My Secure Housing?
Yes.
Who Moved My Universal Health Care? Which are much more relevant to real life circumstances. I don't think it's unreasonable that the humans, the ones with the capacity to think critically, would actually stop and say, hey, what the fuck?
Yeah.
There have been changes that have occurred. This security that they had made future plans based on is no longer there.
It's almost like they made a social contract with someone and it was violated.
Exactly.
And they felt upset that they had made this arrangement and that it was just taken away without any consent from them.
How dare they?
Yep.
And their human brains just get in the way.
Yes.
When they should be simple creatures.
I was going to say, it does work if we considered cheese just to be like stretch goals, niceties, the things that make life extra comfortable and, you know, enjoyable.
Yeah.
Sometimes those do get taken away. It might be a relationship. Like, they just sometimes don't last forever, and you do need to adapt to change and learn to take it on the chin sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's a fine metaphor, but it has to be more carefully specified.
Yeah.
That it is. Also, yeah, shit does get taken off you, and it is unfair, And when you want to survive, sometimes you have to move with it, but it's also okay to be angry and not okay that it is unfair while you adapt to change.
Yeah. And the use of the word injustice in this paragraph really jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Because thinking about the activism that you and I have both been involved in as well, it's like a lot of that is a fight against injustice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very tiring.
Yeah.
So tiring.
Yeah.
And at times I have to try and live in this duality of like, the world's unfair, that's how it is, accept it.
Yeah.
While also trying to find the energy to still go, but I don't want it to be this way and I want it to change. Mm-hmm. How can you be both those things at the same time? I don't know, but you work it out.
Yeah. And that's one reason that I feel like this book is great if what you are doing is using it to reframe some of your own inability to take action for yourself.
Yes.
And you need to become more adaptable to change. But again, in the wrong hands, when this book is used as a weapon against marginalized people or against people who are in the lower in the pecking order in a corporate hierarchy, it's BS.
Yeah, I can really see it being used in 1980s sort of business structures.
Yeah. And we've talked before on this podcast about the need to find it within yourself when it's appropriate, when it's necessary to get up and give yourself a fighting chance to get out of whatever hole you're in.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. We've talked about the way expressions like victim mindset are often misapplied and used against the wrong people in the wrong circumstances.
Yes.
But it can be easy to slip into that mindset on a personal level if you have a refusal to take personal responsibility for things.
Yeah.
But that brings up an interesting question. What is the difference between personal responsibility and extreme personal responsibility?
I guess personal responsibility is understanding that in a big complex world, at the end of the day, you're going to have to do what you need to do, whether it's unfair or not.
Yeah.
Extreme personal responsibility is just giving a pass to all the systems and people who should have made a change and can make a change and just can't be fucked.
Yeah.
Or don't care or would rather keep the money for themselves.
Yeah. Who moved the cheese actually does matter.
Yeah.
In a lot of circumstances.
And also there's been cases throughout human history where someone kept moving the cheese and we kept giving them a pass, and next minute, you know, like fascist dictator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like questioning who moved my cheese and actually holding people accountable for it is part of our like Western ideal democratic system that we're supposed to be able to have the right to challenge those things.
Yeah.
And hold people to account.
Yeah. Moving the cheese in a whimsical fashion has become so normalized. Mm-hmm. We can even look at it now, even if we're speaking about cheese literally, at the supermarkets.
Yeah.
We are experiencing a cost of living crisis.
Yep.
Yeah, where our cheese, so to speak, is becoming less accessible, and the people who have the power to make our cheese more accessible are actively choosing not to.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is entirely true. I don't understand. I am going to be the first to say I have economics, money, the world. I'm very confused by all of it, except that it doesn't work for me. I'm just like, money.
Yeah.
But it just seems ridiculous to me that the cheese I used to buy has gone from like $5.50 up to $10 in the last few years.
Yeah.
That seems impossible.
The fact that the biggest supermarket chains here in Australia and in other parts of the world have experienced record profits that they're not passing down to the consumer.
Yeah.
They're making it harder for the consumer to feed our friggin' families.
Yep.
But there are still powers that be that are just like, oh, just adapt to the change.
Strike, 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 strike.
Oh, but if you complain about injustice, you're just like those silly mini people who just don't want to actually do anything.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah. And I think where personal responsibility is necessary in those situations, that does extend to calling out the structures that are moving the cheese.
Yeah.
It's like, you could look at personal responsibility as like, well, just get a job that makes more money. Just learn to code. You know, that catchphrase that everyone's using these days. Just do this. Just do that.
Write code.
It's like, just work harder.
Yeah.
Just grind more. Just hustle.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy. We all have the same 24 hours in the day. It's like, stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
So many people who are already working like 18-hour days just to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. You're telling them to work harder.
Yep.
Because the people who are controlling the distribution of food are making changes that they don't need to make.
Yep. We didn't address the first time machines took over from people and made actual labor less. The last few, we had the Industrial Revolution, we had the Computer Revolution. We're now about to go through this AI revolution where jobs are going to change and there is less demand for human hours.
Yep.
But we're continuing to work in a system where, no, but we all have to work a 40-hour week and only then do you deserve housing and food.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, all it's doing is moving the income to a centralized positions because your computer program took over. You took the jobs. And how long are we going to run into these walls? Like we're meant to be these mice that run. I don't know if they're telling us we should be these mice, but hell, like I have been running, looking for more cheese, and I keep hitting walls.
Yeah.
And you can only hit walls so long until you get really injured.
Yeah.
And run so far you're exhausted.
Yeah, like they praise these mice and their noses and their instincts for being able to sniff out the changes as they're occurring so that they can then quickly pivot. The problem with that, if you're actually applying it to real life circumstances, and this was also true in the 90s, so we can't even say, oh, it was a different time, is that it is possible to sniff out the changes as they're occurring. But if you are not in a position to respond to those changes because of the systems in which you are being educated, in which you are being employed, in which you are operating on a day-to-day life,
Yep.
you don't always have the option to take the risk of doing something differently.
Yep.
Different people have different levels of risk that they can take on when it comes time to pivot.
Yes. It's a huge risk to uproot your life, to have just having children. Like, you suddenly can't just zigzag run wherever you want.
Yeah.
Just even like looking for housing, you look for a new house, your kids' friends they know the same school, they lose their friends.
Exactly.
I've known people recently that were just kind of like looking for any tiny like little hovel they could within their kids' school district.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are allowed here to go to the school outside your district.
Yeah.
But it's still got to travel an hour to school.
Yeah, it's still quite complicated. And they mention that specifically in here as well, even though it's part of a metaphor, you can't take it quite literally. When he said, he had made future plans based on this cheese, that's also a callback to before, where they had set up homes closer to the cheese. They'd kind of built a little life around access to the cheese.
Yep.
This is what people do in real life. They might rent or buy a home closer to their place of employment for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
For logistical reasons. They might buy or rent a home in a particular school catchment or school district.
Yep.
And become part of a community based around this idea, partly around the idea that they've got some security with their employment. This is not a foolish thing to do.
In fact, I would say it's a necessary thing to do if you actually want to be a part of the world you're living in.
Yeah.
And not just scooting by.
Yeah. If you want to become part of a community, if you want to have some sort of stability for your children, for your family, for yourself,
Yep.
it is like comfort should not be a privilege.
At least some of the most basics of comforts like food, shelter, clothing, companionship, love.
Yeah.
Things that everyone deserves to have, at least in their most basic forms.
Yeah. And that's, again, where the difference between personal responsibility and extreme personal responsibility come into play. We should be questioning who is in charge of these systems. We should be questioning why the cheese keeps moving and make that knowledge of where the cheese is moving to more accessible to more people. Not just the people who have, quote unquote, earned that knowledge by living up to some very capitalistic notion of success.
We all have equal opportunities here.
Yeah. So Hem and Ha have two quite different personalities.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Ha has a sense of personal responsibility. At some point when they're there trying to figure out who moved the cheese, he starts to see the value of changing and of going out to look for new cheese.
Yeah.
Right?
Sink or swim.
Yeah, yeah. And he tries to communicate this to Hem,
Yep.
but Hem doesn't really have a sense of personal responsibility. It's not great to not have any sense of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
So he's used as a character to illustrate the dangers of that. But in illustrating this extreme, he paints a pretty toxic picture, especially in this one part, that seems to take a dig at something. All right, so let me read it. Here it is. Why should we change? Hem asked. We're many people. We're special. This sort of thing should not happen to us, or if it does, we should at least get some benefits. Why should we get benefits? Ha asked. Because we're entitled, Hem claimed. Entitled to what? Ha wanted to know. We're entitled to our cheese. Why? Ha asked. Because we didn't cause this problem, Hem said. Somebody else did this, and we should get something out of it. Ha suggested, maybe we should simply stop analyzing this situation so much and go find some new cheese.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Hem argued. I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
Oh, no. I didn't read much into that the first time.
Did it help that I used like really extreme
Yeah.
voiceover narration?
Yeah. I had the computer reading it to me the first time.
Okay.
That author is not a pro social services person. Like, we should get some benefits. Like, social service benefits, I think, is what they're getting at. And I'm kind of like, oh, it's one of these, like, extreme personal responsibility, no safety nets.
Yeah.
And I mean, talking about safety nets too, a lot of people with these opinions don't realize they have safety nets. They have family safety nets.
Yeah.
They have social safety nets.
Yes. Yes.
That other people don't necessarily have, but they don't see that because they think everyone's life is the same as theirs.
Yeah. And if he is in favor of any sort of social welfare programs, he's certainly not showing it.
Not
He's
in
hiding
this-
it very well.
Yeah.
But this is also where it's worth injecting something that I think is often overlooked in any analysis of personal development writing, okay? So we look at the background of the writer, Dr. Spencer Johnson. He's written a lot of books about management, leadership. He wrote The 1 Minute Manager, which was a hugely successful book that people still go wild about today. I'll read just a little bit more about his credentials. Okay? Yep, so he's an MD, right?
Okay.
He's an international best-selling author, which used to mean something. In the 90s, that meant something. Now, anyone can be an international best-selling author. Technically, if you invent fake categories on Amazon and shit. That's about, I'm about to go off on a tangent. But anyway, okay. So, yeah, he's written a bunch of different books. So his education, he has a BA in psychology. Yeah, his MD degree is from the Royal College of Surgeons. He went to Harvard Medical School, the Mayo Clinic. He was a medical director of communications for Medtronic, who invented cardiac pacemakers. He was a research physician at the Institute for Interdisciplinary Studies, a consultant to the Center for the Study of the Person, and to the School of Medicine at the University of California. His books have been featured in a bunch of different, very high-profile publications. CNN, the Larry King Live, Time Magazine, and so on and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Now, this is something that people don't talk about enough. This person is highly credentialed.
Yeah.
Correct? Mm-hmm. Which, on one hand, gives the person a lot of credibility.
Yep.
Makes the person seem very qualified to write on a particular subject, and that may be true, but along with these credentials, sometimes this also can be a signal of this person's very privileged background. Often people look at accomplishments like this and like, oh, this person has worked very hard. They're a very knowledgeable person. They're very well-rounded. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but we cannot ignore the fact that, especially in certain academic systems and business systems, the people who are able to achieve these things aren't always like, clawing their way through this very oppressive system and acquiring all of these things just off the back of their work. There are networks that aid in this. Yeah, there are systems that make it easier for someone who has attained a certain credential to then obtain numerous other credentials based on who they have in their social circles as well.
Yes.
Which, again, I'm not saying invalidates their knowledge, but we cannot be hypnotized by these titles and say, oh, well, this person is so much smarter than me, so I'm just going to take everything they say as gospel.
Like, I have no doubt that medical school is grueling for everybody who does it.
Yeah.
Trying to get into it currently, it is not the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Even with more, 20 years later, changes they've made to try and make it more accessible to people who don't have the same privilege, it's very sparse.
Yeah.
It's easier than it was, but very much not, and you can see that in the statistics of the representation in the cohort.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like it. Every year at the open day at the uni I want to go to, I corner the Dean of Medicine and ask him where they're up to in making medicine more accessible to people from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Does he just run away from you every time?
I mean, no, he was very polite and very respectfully took my feedback and was not in opposition.
Yes.
But more of that, there's so much to do, so little time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll see you next year, mate.
Yeah. And that's also a good illustration of why it's important to think about or to not be completely hypnotized by the background, the academic credentials of a person when we're talking about something like this, when we're talking about social benefits. Words like benefits and entitlement, again, right now especially, have been heavily weaponized against marginalized communities.
When the people using those terms almost always have very happily taken everything that they were entitled to.
And generational wealth does qualify as an entitlement as well.
I was about to say intergenerational wealth.
Yeah, that is a handout.
Yeah, even if it's not
is
given directly to you, the safety net of having family with money that's not going to let you totally burn.
Yeah.
if you fall.
Yeah. That provides that emotional, that psychological safety net.
And that, yeah, it's easy to run off into the maze if you know that you can stick up a white flag and someone will come get you.
Yeah. If you've got a stronger helmet than the next person, you can just ricochet through life as much as you want.
It's not surprising that I would say the majority of big, like, entrepreneurial tech sort of folk, I don't know, majority?
A lot of
entrepreneurial big business folk do come from backgrounds with some sort of safety net, social capital. And I guess I don't say that from a position of looking from the outside either. Like, I do have a lot of privilege in that way. Family that can pick me up if I need to, and they have. And the only reason that I haven't ended up on the street was because family came and got me. And that can't be looked upon lightly. There's a big difference between the outcomes of those two people.
Yeah. And recognizing our own privilege, which is something we've even talked about, like our individual levels of privilege we've talked about on this podcast, is so important.
Yes.
If we don't recognize that, and especially people who are far more privileged in a broader category of contexts, if they don't recognize that, and they're telling people like, oh, who cares who moved the cheese? Just go find new cheese. It's like, we do need to question these systems.
And they do truly see themselves as in equal positions to us, like to other people too. They can't see it.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure how or why and how to fix that.
Yeah. So this illustration of him being a person who just feels entitled to benefits and for that reason just doesn't want to change, there's a lot of bias that's being shown in that description. Yeah. And there's a lot of very oversimplified language that readers of this book, especially in management and leadership positions, can then take and impose onto other people. And that shit's got to stop.
Yeah. There's a difference, too, between the other mini person who ran around the maze over and over looking for cheese, couldn't find any, came back to where there used to be cheese, and is then asking, well, could I please have some cheese so that I can keep going?
Yeah.
I'm totally out of energy.
Yeah. This book assumes that there will be cheese somewhere.
Yeah, that everyone who goes running looking for cheese will find it.
Yeah, and the truth is, sometimes you go looking for the cheese and you freaking die.
Yeah.
Because you find yourself unhoused. You find yourself unable to afford medical care. You find yourself unable to afford, like, preventative health treatments.
Yep.
And you will deteriorate, making it harder for you to go out into this maze. And we already, like, as a society, have an understanding of the dangers of the quote-unquote rat race. Which, again, is like, you know, you can call this maze whatever you want, but it's a rat race.
Well, I thought that in this book, some people are rats and some people are mice.
Yeah.
The rats just can crawl over the walls. And the god hand that took the cheese also sometimes puts down glue traps.
Yeah.
Between the good stashes of cheese and other certain areas, like Cheese Zone Z never had that much cheese to begin with. And so the people didn't save any cheese because they didn't have enough to save.
Yeah.
And now they can't get past the glue traps to get to the next cheese zones.
Yeah. And these are individual entities.
Yeah.
Right? Two mice who kind of operate together, but they're individual entities. Hem and Haw, who are individual entities.
Yep.
You can't apply that same thinking to someone responsible for a family.
Yeah.
To someone responsible for a small business. For someone responsible for a social movement.
Yep.
Because there are other people at stake.
Yeah.
It's not just like we as one monolithic group have to just adapt to change.
You just have to sacrifice everyone important to you. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if your group can't agree on something, then it's a problem about your group. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Try to get a single family to all agree on recycling. And sometimes even that is a challenge.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
But
how dare
anyway.
you get angry when the safety of your most close loved ones is at risk?
Yeah.
Like, what? We do like to blame people when they do lose their temper, and you have to be compassionate. Like, I don't really agree with violence in most situations.
Yeah.
But you also need to be compassionate that if someone's lost their shit, there might be a reason.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's another good opportunity to remember that what we're talking about here is like when we're applying these concepts to ourselves and our own individual capacities to adapt to change,
Yeah.
this is very different from when these things are being imposed on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we need to like issue that reminder every now and then.
Yeah. Like, difference between a storm came and dropped a tree over and crashed your car. Not your fault, anyone's fault.
Yeah.
Versus someone moving your cheese.
Yeah.
If God and nature moved your cheese, sometimes you just got to do it. You got to move with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the difference we're trying to make is when someone's moving the cheese and we're supposed to accept that it's their right as other individuals and systems. Individuals have made systems.
Yeah.
To keep moving that cheese and for us to only be accepting of that.
Yes. I think looking at the current housing crisis, especially even just here in Brisbane as an example, thanks Olympics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of factors, but anyway, when new legislation came in, changing the rules around how frequently landlords can raise rents, one of the side effects of that was people saying, okay, well, I'm going to ditch the tenants that have been living in my investment property for how many years, so that new tenants coming in, I can charge them a much higher rate, give them a 6-month lease, kick them out unless they're willing to pay an even higher rate. And what is the response often to people who complain about that? It's like, hey, it's their property. They have a right to do whatever they want with the rents, blah, blah, blah. Just adapt. It's that attitude that says, don't worry about who moved your cheese. You just go to move to the other side of town because that's where the new cheese is. Forget the community you've established. Forget the home that you've built, or that sense of home that you've built in that place. Forget your kid's school. Forget all that. Just go to a different suburb.
Yeah. And there's a big difference between the free open market in extras, in the things that are on top of your basic living, your basic human rights. But I just don't believe in, my personal belief is just capitalism doesn't belong where it's the basic rights of humans to have those things. Yeah. When they privatized our water and electricity systems and, made it an entire the investment has been property. Still is, but it's starting to move because people can't get into it. And the people have all die. And then intergenerational wealth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel.
Yes. So through the next parts of the story, we begin to see the differences between Hem and Haw and their attitude towards change, right? Haw starts to picture finding this new cheese. He pictures, having an adventure, going through the maze and enjoying a different way of living than just sitting in Cheese Station C and complaining that there's no cheese, right? So he writes, the more clearly Haw saw the image of himself finding and enjoying the new cheese, the more he saw himself leaving Cheese Station C. Let's go, he exclaimed all of a sudden. No, Hem quickly responded. I like it here. It's comfortable. It's what I know. Besides, it's dangerous out there. No, it isn't, Haw argued. We've run through many parts of the maze before, and we can do it again. I'm getting too old for that, Hem said. and I'm afraid I'm not interested in getting lost and making a fool of myself. Are you? With that, Ha's fear of failing returned and his hope of finding new cheese faded. And of course, from there, it just talks about them having trouble sleeping, becoming depressed and irritable, and not having energy. But this actually happens to people, and we can't really deny it. Hem talks about being too old. For some people, like, if we look at, for example, the demographic that is most at risk for homelessness, this is older, divorced, or single women, right?
Yep.
So age does play a role in someone's ability to just suddenly pivot. Okay? Again, some people use age as an excuse, but for some people, it is valid. When he says, like, it's dangerous out there, and then Ha says, no, it isn't. We've run through parts of the maze before, and we can do it again. It's like, good. Ha has a can-do attitude. Great. But, again, applying this to real life, for some people, it is dangerous.
Yeah.
Some people legitimately can't risk changes. But that's also where we have to be really careful about when things are just a BS excuse and think of different ways to strategize.
Yeah.
When our risks are higher moving forward. We can't just push everyone to the same kind of action as well.
I guess a positive sort of spin on it, like from me, I do I very much can see myself in that because I have been in situations where the old cheese station has become so rotten and so smelly that anything would be better than staying there.
Yep.
For instance, transition. Like, it just was not possible anymore. And
To not transition,
yeah, like,
okay.
to stay in the stinky old cheese station that I stayed in for way too long, trying to be like, oh, but I'm comfortable here, even though I wasn't comfortable. Like, it stank and there was no cheese. So it's kind of like that tipping point of where the danger is worth the risk. Like, it's worth taking the risk.
Yeah.
But, and a positive attitude will do a lot for you. But you also have to give yourself room to be realistic and to be upset and sad about the situation. I guess my way of dealing with it is trying to compartmentalize those things, giving yourself that space and then putting it away and saying, okay, now let's do what we need to keep living.
Yep.
It's not one or the other.
And it's interesting here as well, the way it illustrates how that person who is ready to move forward and is ready to take a chance and is ready to go into the maze can quite easily be brought down if they latch too much on that person, that entity that wants them to stay stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tricky illustration of that here because, again, the whole, like, risk tolerance thing is very conditional, based on, especially for different marginalized communities. But this is where Ha starts to become, like, the hero character. So Ha starts to take these small steps to find the new cheese, so that sense of security, that sense of safety, and all of that, pushes through that fear, encounters little successes along the way that are quite encouraging, encounters obstacles as well, and you get a sense of the ups and downs that Ha goes through during this process. Ha eventually just has enough of Hem's complaining, has enough of Hem saying, no, like we just need to work harder to find our cheese here, or, you might find that nothing changes and blah, blah. Just very like drag you down kind of talk. And he says, where am I more likely to find cheese? Here or in the maze? Okay. He painted a picture in his mind. He saw himself venturing out into the maze with a smile on his face. While this picture surprised him, it made him feel good. He saw himself getting lost now and then in the maze, but felt confident he would eventually find new cheese out there and all the good things that came with it. He gathered his courage. Good. I like this Haw character, right? Then he used his imagination to paint the most believable picture he could. I like that they used the word believable there. With the most realistic details of him finding and enjoying the taste of new cheese. Now, of course, these realistic details are more about like painting this like rich picture of this cheese. So he sees himself like eating all these different types of cheese. And he says to him, sometimes, Hem, things change and they are never the same again. This looks like one of those times. That's life. Life moves on, and so should we. Good.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
If you're just gonna sit around and wait for things to change, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Oh, yeah.
Like, kind of forever.
Mm-hmm.
And ain't nobody got time for that.
Yep.
Yeah. Hall laughed and announced, "It's maze time!" Like, it's written that way, with the ellipses. I like that. Hem didn't laugh, and he didn't respond.
It's maze time!
Yeah. It's like, sorry, Hem, sucked in. Like, you just chill where you are.
You
whatever.
can't make people move.
No. No, exactly. So while Hem was wondering who moved my cheese, Haw was saying, why didn't I get up and move with the cheese sooner? Again, that kind of circles back to some of the issues that the book completely ignores, much like a lot of self-help, personal development writing. But anyway, one thing that we haven't talked about yet is these cheese messages that he writes on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how in the book they're
Little
illustrated with an
motivational
actual...
posters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Motivational posters that they had put up in their homes or at Cheese Station C, I think,
Yeah.
and in different parts of the maze. But I put a little tab on the one that it's probably my favorite of these motivational messages that Haw puts up in the maze. So he wrote a saying on the wall ahead of him and stared at it for some time. Can you read it to us, Mika?
What would you do if you weren't afraid?
How often do you ask yourself that, Mika?
A lot? Yeah. Or, I mean, I would say I am on that more trying it and seeing what happens for good reasons, safety nets.
Yeah.
But I would, yeah, there's certainly things that I'm probably not the best example of this. I do way more than I should, actually. I'm probably more of the mouse just running into walls.
Yeah.
But I get hurt. And so it's more like, what would I do if I weren't exhausted?
Yeah. And you know what? Like, the two of us, I think we can legitimately say, without too much convincing to anyone listening, that we do tend to push through our fear.
Yeah.
One very clear example of that is the fact that we're sitting here creating this podcast about looking critically at personal development. Like, we clearly have been doing the work.
Yeah, there's a reason that we, like, started hanging out. We saw that in each other.
Yeah.
And I have to say, though, Leslie, we work really good together.
Well, I must say, Mika, that I'm quite fond of you.
Are you going to dip in me?
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad that, that the day came that you looked at me and said, let's be friends. gosh. All right.
We need to come together now and get this done.
No, I think we're going a little off track with these puns. It's like, manchego. Yeah. All right. So you were saying?
I do have fear, though. Mm-hmm. Even though I take quite a lot of jumps into the unknown, my fear actually comes in more to do with... It's very internal. It's not real world cheddars. It's internal personal cheeses that I'm chasing where the fear comes in. I want to change. I want to be different in lots of ways.
So would you say that sometimes you get fed up of where you are?
I do.
And need to move in a different direction?
I do. I need to kick that fear to the curb and just do the things that I know are going to make me a happier, healthier person instead of continually going backwards and falling back into comfort zones that are making me unwell.
Yeah. So the idea about pushing through fear and respecting fear is summed up kind of nicely in this one section of the book where he writes about Haw. He says, he knew sometimes some fear can be good. When you are afraid things are going to get worse, if you don't do something, it can prompt you into action. But it is not good when you are so afraid that it keeps you from doing anything. And I think most people have kind of felt, can see themselves in that statement, having kind of been stuck in place because they were too fearful of pushing forward, right? Yeah. But Haw kind of has his hero moments, continuing to push through this fear, having these little successes that help him move forward, finding little bits of cheese on the floor and eating them, which I just love because I would totally eat tasty floor cheese if that were my one responsibility, if that were the thing that were going to keep me alive.
Now I know how to trap you. Little cheese trail.
Yes. Oh shit, where's the part I wanted to read?
Cheese. Ooh, cheese.
Cheese is a kind of meat. And this is a part where he really learns the big lesson, right? He says, okay, Hall looked down the dark passageway and was aware of his fear. What lay ahead? Was it empty? Or worse, were there dangers lurking? He began to imagine all kinds of frightening things that could happen to him. He was scaring himself to death. Then he laughed at himself. He realized his fears were making things worse. So he did what he would do if he weren't afraid. He moved in a new direction. Yeah. That's great. So he moves in these new directions. He eventually finds this big new cheese station just with cheese piled to the sky, and finds Sniff and Scurry there with their fat little bellies because they had been chilling there for a while. And they'd had lots of cheese success. And then, of course, the big lesson that he learns is that taking that risk can pay off in a really big way.
Or does pay off. It sounds pretty certain that if you go out there, you're going to find a big lot of cheese. But the truth is, most of us find little caches of cheese, and you there, and you have to kind of decide, oh, okay, I found a little bit of safety. Should I go out again? Or should I stay here?
Yeah.
And you know that it's going to run out, but...
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another important thing to remember, that different people have different risk tolerance for this kind of thing. One of the other messages that he writes somewhere in his journey is, it is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. And if it is a one or the other situation, okay, fine. But a lot of people don't survive the maze. Yeah. And it's also up to society, governments, communities to try to lessen the burden on our fellow humans
Yeah.
so that people can go out and find the cheese more frequently to make that maze a bit less perilous for more people.
Yeah, I think for me, that desire to fight is not for getting justice for myself. It's out of the fear of, or the distaste of other people having to go through that as well.
Exactly.
It's more like leaving something behind to make it better for the next one.
Yeah. Some people want cheese for their entire community.
Yes.
Not just for themselves.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why when you find the small cache, you can't just stop. You're like, this isn't enough.
Yeah.
This isn't enough to go around.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily financial. It's a lot of things, the cheese, for me, when it comes to society and my community.
Yeah. But
Basic human respect.
Yeah. Basic human respect is important. But speaking of community as well, one of our aims with this podcast is to take these personal development concepts and make them more accessible to more people, particularly people in marginalized communities.
Yeah.
So when people are in a situation where they do feel stuck, where they are experiencing the effects of systems that put a disproportionate number of obstacles in front of them, between them and their cheese, what can people do?
Well, mazes are much safer in groups. Not going out on your own into a dangerous maze is a great step that has helped me a lot. Got a close friend who we bought a house together. Have done a lot of life things together, just facing life struggles together. It's nice. And even when things are hard, it's less scary.
Yeah. Creating more of a culture of mutual support
Yep.
is so beneficial to people as individuals and to, the collective good of humanity.
Yeah. I feel like a bit of a conspiracy theorist, but I sometimes wonder this whole like nuclear family, suburbs splitting people apart. Was it all just to weaken us as a society so that we couldn't question the powers that be?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of academic research that supports that theory.
Yep.
One thing that I always advocate for with people who are constantly dealing with things like racial battle fatigue or chronic pain, or just who are heavily involved in activism, and this is just one thing, is that it's important to be conscious of which battles we are choosing to fight, what our actual capacities are, and how we can compartmentalize our efforts, how we can find our place within those communities to do the best, strongest work that we can so that we don't burn ourselves out, so that we can be part of the strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Leaning on our activist communities, banding together, but also being very honest with ourselves about when we're making bullshit excuses.
I wouldn't know anything.
When we
about
do have the capacity to go out into the maze,
Yeah.
but are instead choosing to just go, no, I don't want to. Yeah.
I was going to say, I have, when I'm making bullshit excuses about why I don't have the resources to go into the maze, but go anyway.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, gotta do it.
Yeah. I'll often limp through the maze and just kind of see what happens.
Kind of what I've been trying to do, but I'm at a point where I can't go forward. I got to go back, get some more cheese, and then try again once I'm filled up.
Yeah, I tend to carry extra cheese around in my pocket just for such occasions. So on that note, I mean, we've talked a lot about change, a lot about adapting to change. We've emphasized the validity in asking who actually did move the freaking cheese and what needs to be done to address that particular thing. But also how, what our individual capacities for change are or should be or could be.
Yep.
So I think at this point we can close up this session with a quote.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of cheating this time. I've got 2 quotes, mainly because the first one is another Angela Davis quote.
Right.
And it's like, 2 Angela Davis in a row? I better tack on another one after that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
But very powerful quote about change in the context of exactly what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Angela Davis is a very powerful and prolific activist, a scholar, an intellectual. She's just an incredible human being. She's, strong in the abolition movement.
Mm-hmm.
She's just epic, right? Has done so much work in like Black liberation movements and so on, and has done a bunch of work here in Australia as well on that front.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
They Sisters Inside brings her over to speak at their conference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the quote is, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept."
Yeah.
How is that for a statement about who moved the cheese?
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? I'm not going to accept that suddenly there's just nothing here for me.
Mm.
Like, I'm going to create some change. My second quote is from Maya Angelou,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Maya Angelou, of course, very famous Black American writer, a poet, civil rights activist. She's written a bunch of books. She was prolific in her creativity for decades before she passed in 2014. And this quote is actually one that I have printed and framed in the bathroom next to my office. So you've probably seen it a few times.
Yep. I read it every time.
Yep. It's one of my favorites. And it's quite simple about change. It's, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude.
Yeah.
And that to me is something that means so much more coming from someone like Maya Angelou than someone like, say, I don't know, Brian Tracy.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, Maya, I know the shit you've been through,
Mm-hmm. And changing your attitude doesn't mean that you are accepting that those things are okay.
Yeah.
But it is, that change in attitude can be this is a battle that I will take up when it's time.
Yes, exactly.
Which is sometimes the way you got to do it.
Mm.
You got to be patient sometimes, and it sucks.
Yeah. So 2 beautiful quotes from 2 beautiful women.
Yeah. So, Leslie.
Yes, Mika.
Where can people find us?
Ooh, well, you can find us on my Instagram at leslievcoaching, Leslie with an IE. And while you're hanging out there checking out pictures of me and of us, you can send us some messages. If there are any books that you want us to discuss or anything you want to ask us about, just shoot a DM through that account. And you can also visit my website, leslievcoaching.com, if you want to book a free introductory life coaching session. And we can talk about how to help you through your maze to find your cheese station. Define your cheese, and then go get it.
Let's chase that cheese.
Let's get that cheddar, baby. All right. So thank you for joining us. Don't forget to give us a big, juicy 5-star rating, because that would be wonderful. Help get us into more people's ears. And we'll connect with you again in Chapter 6. Bye-bye.
Bye.